Commission meeting of Tuesday, August 1st. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Weisgerber,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Next order of business is the review and approval of meeting minutes from June 6, 2023, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Do we have any comments or additions or markups to the meeting minutes?
The short version.
The short version, yes, that was didn't have the blank pages. Yes. Well, the text was the same except for the
Correct.
additional pages.
Correct.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Too big for me to see in here.
Mr. Weisgerber,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Redmond.
Yes.
5-0, motion carries.
Next order of business is a public hearing for case number 2023-04, 115 Railroad Avenue, conditional use. Do we have a motion to open into a public hearing for this case?
Move to open a public hearing.
Second?
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Weisgerber.
Yes.
5-0, motion carries.
Do we have anyone from the applicant that wanted to speak about? We have nobody signed up for the case. Is there anybody from the applicant that would like to present?
John? Mr. Greer, would you like, they're asking if they'd like to present.
You don't have to. I just didn't know if somebody wanted. Okay. So if we have any questions, we might ask to call you up at the podium, but okay. Okay. So what we hear is we got a full set here from the building permit. So is there anything from the city you want to?
Sure, I'll be brief. There's a lot of information there because we're doing a site plan review and a conditional use at the same time. So this application is on the lot at 115 Railroad. Property's been through multiple stages of review. They were talking about this project when I got here, and it's been sort of an evolution in that, and has gone through historic preservation in that, multiple reviews, gotten variances on floodplain because the downtown area is in a regulated floodplain. So what we have here is really an opportunity to reinvest and promote infill development in the downtown area. I won't belabor the long history of the property, but the house, needless to say, was deemed to be unsalvageable, and so the applicant's really starting with a blank slate here. So it's a restaurant use, 2 stories plus a basement. The basement's used for storage. That also prevents, an excess height. And keeps the building in scale with the adjacent structures, and the variances were granted for that. Looking, there's definitions in the staff report, the conditional use code requirements. Everybody knows those. The site plan review requirements. City engineering has reviewed this. Cindy's reviewed this multiple times. She's now recommending conditional approval. She's got a few minor items, which obviously we concur with. They're all standard permitting practices and things like that. Looking at this really as an opportunity to build an attractive masonry structure. As I indicated, Historic Preservation and Planning Commission really took a deep dive on this project and looked at it. They had some scaling and massing issues. There were some windows that were added. There were some other things in that hearing process. Notably, the property does come up near to the right-of-way, the bike trail. So we'll want to look at the landscaping. We do want to look at the connection from the trail to the building and promoting the streetscape plan aesthetic. So there's some recommended comments in that. Their regulatory agencies, MSD, all of your permitting, building codes, all of those things, city engineer letter. We would want the sidewalk to match the streetscape. Trees and other landscaping elements need to be consistent with the downtown master plan and compliance with the outdoor lighting standards that the city recently adopted. And in talking with all of those comments with Mr. Greer, the applicant representative, I believe they were in full agreement with those comments and conditions. And I think that they stand prepared to bring a nice project forward for the city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mark, if I could just add one thing, that this project definitely goes in line with our Harrison Street project, and as far as some of the connections that they'll be making to, because the way we're doing the railroad project and the way we're widening Harrison and the connection from Carl Brown.
Question, Mr. Wright.
Yes.
The floodplain, is it 50 or 100 year elevation for flood is what, 585?
Thought Cindy's letter, she indicated, I want to say it actually changed with the recent, I got to find it in this packet, sorry. It changed from,
591.
yeah, it actually,
It was
yeah,
591.
it was reduced.
Lowered.
It was lowered.
Yeah, it used to be like
So the building's
575,
actually,
but
yeah,
it went up and then, okay.
yeah, the last update of the floodplain regulations actually, it got better for downtown. So,
Okay.
in fact, she says June 27th, 2023, it's permitting is 587. So, yeah, and that was the same when we did the gazebo and other things like that. So, and this is all wet flood proofed. It's got flood vents. He's got the basement's got a sump in it. The structure, everything's elevated in that. And we went through the BZA to get those flood vents.
Yeah, we just have historically had a lot of issues with the basements along Harrison and Railroad over years with floods. So,
Yeah, we talked through with the applicant when they were in the kind of the preliminary staff development. It was, the reality was the third floor was probably not going to be feasible for this location because of adverse impacts to adjoining properties. And so they really need that storage because the site is so tight that's really going to be primarily their storage area. And having toured the applicant actually owns the very popular establishment in Foster, and having toured and walked that, and they are in a floodplain there, and that basement, it is fantastic. And seeing that construction, it appears that in a lot of ways this structure is very similar in construction methodologies to the improvements. Yep.
zoning text amendment for smoke shops. Mr. Wright, would you like to give us some
Sure.
quick background on that?
I'll watch it. Video here.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Hang on a second.
So we lose the.
I think I touched the touch screen, but in any event, we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so this is a case seeking a initiation of a zoning text amendment regarding the regulation of smoke, tobacco, electronic cigarette vaping, and CBD uses. This would basically City Council took action to establish a 180-day moratorium to give the Planning and Zoning Commission time to consider these things. The crux of this is that these uses are extraordinarily harmful, particularly with youth and underage persons. Youth and underage persons. We have some information from the schools. They've really pleaded for the ability to step into this and take, more action in this. And without belaboring the staff report too much, there's a lot of different studies out there about the impacts of these. And, working through this, looking at what other communities are doing, there's some articles that have been cited in here. And then I actually attached a really, really interesting article from the Atlantic talking about vape shops, and in particular with the retail environment, because the uses don't require a lot of renovation. They don't require a lot of overhead. They proliferate a lot in retail areas that may not be Class A, or may be transitioning, or not quite ready for remodeling and or premier tenant space. And so with that, because of the ubiquitous nature of the types of devices, the propensity for underage usage, Council took action to establish a 180-day moratorium, looking what other neighboring communities are doing in response to Superintendent Broadwater's communication. Miami Township's taking action to ban these, and we are proposing a very simple text amendment to A, define them, and B, ban them, very similar to what the marijuana prohibitions are in the Chapter 1165. So there's not a lot of meat to this text amendment. It is what it is, and I think we looked at that while there are several around our borders, there's one in the city, and that would be grandfathered.
Okay. Yeah, there's what I saw was basically two portions. One defines what a smoke shop is, and the other bans the smoke shop that's defined in the text amendment.
Right. So the action this evening is, so really you have a couple of options. You can find that the drafted amendment is appropriate and elect to adopt a motion to initiate. That's how we've been doing text amendments with the Planning and Zoning Commission, initiating as per 1115A. And then to set a public hearing on September 5th at or about 7 p.m., consistent with 111505, or you can instruct staff to make additional changes or elect not to. Our recommendation is to proceed as presented, based on the action from council and based on actions surrounding communities are taking, and to initiate, to schedule a public hearing to initiate the text amendment, and then schedule the public hearing consistent with 1115 of the zoning code.
Comments on it? Yes, that's right.
Question: since we now define and call it out, is there a reason why it wouldn't show up in the table of permitted or non-permitted uses?
There's a lot of uses in there that don't show up in the table of permitted uses. We are actually in a zoning rewrite right now.
Okay,
That is something actually we discussed with our consultant about
because we have a disconnect.
the table.
Yeah, our table and the rest of the callouts in the code are not the same,
Right.
and so somewhere we got to make that sync.
Totally agree. If you're going to live and die by that table,
So if we're gonna make an amendment, should we add it to the table or not?
Most of the time, if I may, if it's not in there, it's not permitted.
Okay, and that's, again, is there a call out that says these are only for that table in 1156?
I was actually going to look up.
Is it call out that says these are the ones that are permitted, or if it's not specified? Because if it's not specified today, you'd say it's not permitted.
Hmm.
But then why are we adding the text?
And I can actually tell you that I lived through that in a prior community, and that is
If it's ill-defined, we will be in trouble because you don't have a definition, right? You don't have it clearly articulated. So it needs, again, my opinion,
Mhm.
needs to be clearly articulated. And now we're adding text to say it's not permitted. Okay, is that sufficient? And that's really the source of question.
Hmm.
Sure.
Is that proper, adequate?
So would you put it in there under,
If you put a label and have it,
56.
in 1156. if you
because we
have
have C for conditionally, P for principally, and A for allow.
and if it's blank, it's not approved,
Temporaries, all that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
right?
So I
I see what you're saying.
Since it is called out in the code,
Mhm.
why is it not also in the table? So this is kind of a Scrivener thing, right? But it's making sure our code is consistent,
Mhm.
because if somebody came to you with that table, right, you got to read the whole code to get it. But I just, again, this is administrative in my mind. I don't think this board needs to weigh in on that, but it just was a call out in my mind that we need to be consistent through the text of the code.
Well, I went through the code, and what's interesting, and to your point, one other use that's prohibited is the marijuana uses, and the marijuana uses are not referenced in the table of permitted uses either. And I'm scrolling through them right now. So I think what I would advise is that when we go through the process of rewriting the zoning code, I think in taking a look at the entirety of the table, it's probably appropriate to look at uses that, when you just have the blanks, here's this, and then it's totally blank. I mean, it's nothing for us to amend Chapter 1156 to add a line that says smoke shops and leave it all blank, if that's the intent.
Or you put it in that if it's not covered in the table, it's not permitted, right?
Oh, like
There's
a footnote at the bottom
or
of the
something
table?
at the table that says these are permitted. If it's not in the table, it's not permitted.
I
Which
think
is
that's a good idea because there's so many in the definition section that's not
Well,
Right.
you can
permitted.
get lost
Our
in-
table would
in
be huge.
definition after definition after
Right.
definition.
You could,
So-
and to that point, I mean, but there's also the other thing, and I would caution against, is because the use table is very generic and bland in certain respects, and so there's a lot of room for interpretive license in that. So I think right now what we're doing is we say they're not permitted. You add a footnote. Any use not specific? Do you say any use not permitted is prohibited? I'm okay with that. I've administered codes that say that.
I'm going to leave it to the administration to make the decision. Right?
Okay.
I'm just bringing up the fact that we've got things that we're saying are not permitted. They're not in the table, which is okay, but there's nothing in the table that says it is or isn't.
Okay.
So I'm looking for consistency throughout the code.
And I think if you added to administratively something that has some procedure to have them apply, ask the question, because we run into this just in our own work as we go and have to look through the zoning code and say, where does it fall? And it's a very specific little niche. And is it permitted? Is it not permitted? We don't know. And so if there's something in there that says administratively it could be taken care of, because even if it's in the definition, it may not fit, like you said, the exact definition.
Right.
So,
Well, actually, the definition of a retail business could cover that too. So,
yeah.
So anyway, I again, it comes up as consistency through the code.
Sure.
I just want to bring it up. It says, look, I think we need to make sure, to your point, if we're looking at the code, make sure it's clean. The only other thing that I really had thought about was there are other uses that in years gone by were issues, like adult entertainment, right? And there were things that had been court tested on language around an outright ban versus where the allowance is relative to residential, schools, and other.
Right.
And so, is there an issue with having an outright ban versus having the code define it where it is only allowed?
So I'm not an attorney, and I think you're asking for you're asking for potentially a legal opinion. That said, our solicitor's office drafted this,
Okay.
so I would put stock in the fact that they believe this is legitimate.
That's fine.
I don't believe that this specific ban has been challenged in the same way that things like signage regulations and adult entertainment regulations. With signage regulations, there's always Supreme Court cases on time, manner, place. You can't have to be content neutral. All of those things, and those change depending on the case that gets reviewed before the state or federal, the federal Supreme Court. Similarly with the adult entertainment uses, that I believe that, if I remember some of the case law on that, is First Amendment. Some of that has to do with First Amendment. I don't believe that regulating commercial business activity from a land use practicing professional, and this is not a legal opinion, I think they are different. That said, that doesn't mean somebody's not going to challenge.
I'm fundamentally, in my philosophy, and I'm just a person sitting up here, right? I really want the free enterprise to control, but the reason we're here is to uphold a community standard.
Correct.
Right? So the zoning commission is here to help establish and uphold, and then it's through, the administrator, legal, and others to uphold it and enforce it. So it's okay to come back and say, yeah, I'm not a fan. I think it should be banned. Okay, but from a community perspective, I also want to make sure, are we adjudicating this properly when we say, I'm worried about kids, I'm worried about misuse. So do I care that it's near a residential house? Do I care that it's near a school? What are those distances versus, do I care if it's up in our industrial district? So I'm trying to really break down, and as opposed to just saying, time out. I don't care. I don't want it.
Right.
Is it appropriate to take a look and say, what am I afraid of? Maybe that's the wrong word, but what am I trying to protect the community from? And where would I say it's okay if I regulate it like our other businesses?
Well, so to that end, I can speak a little bit to the concerns that we heard from the schools. And, the city's only 5 square miles, 5.5 square miles. And so I would argue that anywhere in this city that if the goal is to make them inaccessible to youth, which that this does that. Now, again, we can't control what happens beyond our borders, right? We do know that an adjacent community in Claremont County is taking the similar action. So that's very positive, because that's 35 square miles of territory that will also be off limits. And the city being 5 square miles, obviously, one could say potentially anywhere in the city might present a problem because of proximity. It doesn't take long to get from one side of the city to the other by foot, by bike, or by car, or whatever. I think that based upon what we looked at in the studies and hearing the school district's concerns, I think that the solution now is a ban and a prohibition. And you have one that's grandfathered. And I think what you're suggesting is a more granular approach.
So I'm asking the question, if the board wants to approve an outright ban, that's fine, right? There's really 2 levels of concern. Maybe it's not a concern, but food for thought. First, from a legal perspective, before council approves through the final approval process, because this has to go back to council. Is that true?
Yeah. So you'll initiate public hearing, and
right.
then
So I would ask, why is this different than what we had to do with adult entertainment, with court cases or other? Maybe it's totally different, and that's okay. I'm not an attorney. Make sure we're keeping the city out of trouble by not overstepping. And then, is it reasonable at some point to come back with a more granular approach?
I think you could certainly, to the first point, I think that I don't believe that our city solicitor would let us advance something that he did not believe that he could uphold in court.
I understand.
That's in my past experience, it's always been that.
The solicitor's great, and I don't have any question there.
That doesn't mean somebody's not going to challenge it.
Correct. Are we
So,
just making sure we're
If
good standing?
if the bodies that are involved, Planning and Zoning Commission and Council, elect to advance this as presented, we stand fully prepared to defend it. That doesn't mean
Mhm.
it won't. That doesn't mean it won't survive challenge. That doesn't mean it will survive challenge. We believe that it will, based upon bringing it forward at this time. That said, I think that you put it in. It's and the other thing to remember is that code documents are living documents.
Mhm.
You don't take a code, adopt it, and then throw it on the shelf and never change it ever again.
We're just
So,
talking about redoing
because
it.
we've
Yeah.
done that 3 or 4 times this year,
Hmm.
and we're going to do that more with the zoning code. So I think, at the end of the day, I think this gets us at least no more now. And then if there was ever a need, just like with food trucks, if you ever wanted to look at it again, certainly the commission has the ability to initiate text amendments, per the code. Council has the ability to initiate text amendments per the code. And so that avenue is always there if you want to take that approach.
Understood. And I appreciate your comments. I wasn't trying to stir you
No,
up too
no.
much.
No, it's just that there's a lot of process, and that it's always a fluid process.
Right.
And the important thing is that if you put something in the code, you can change it.
Hmm.
If it if community standards change.
Right.
We
We do it all the time. That's what it's
So-
for.
What we're trying to decide now is whether we want to advance this to a public hearing. We're not actually going to.
No, I understand. And
No,
that's
you
just-
still have to have a public
Just want to be ready because you go to public hearing and it's going to have to go to council for final approval.
I do have one question
Yes,
that's
sir.
not process related. I understand the smoke shop definition is 50% of sales is smoke paraphernalia of some sort, vape, whatever. I mean, what's going to stop a gas station from filling their entire interior with smoke shop and sell 51% gas?
Well, I mean, the way that it's written,
Because I can name you 3 gas stations right now in Loveland that sell probably quite a bit.
they're close. And with any code requirement, you are going to.
They're only going to sell more
Right.
if we don't let smoke shops come in.
Well, but you
One on Kemper, right below Montgomery.
Mhm.
I can be there in 5 minutes.
Kemper below Montgomery. Well, see, so that's Sims Township.
Well, I get it,
Right.
but I mean, any teenager is going to drive to Kemper and
Sure. And to my point, we can't control what's outside of our boundaries. My hope is if we're committed to this,
Well, I think you ought to take it a step further if you really want to ban it and take it out of the gas stations. Otherwise, you're not doing anything.
right. and then you get into the whole what's in
Other-
the gas station,
or-
retail sales,
Or
and
you're
that
just
kind of-
compromising free enterprise.
That I appreciate what Mr. Weisgerber brought to this because I think that's the part about this legislation that makes me a little uncomfortable too. I think is an outright ban on something that I think that the legislation as presented is clean and it does the job as intended. But to Mr. O'Neill's point as well, who's to say that a business today doesn't in 5 years dip into that over 50% threshold of smoke paraphernalia, and then what do we do about that? Are we going to go in and regulate that business in some way and say you need to sell less of this profitable? So I think that's part of the thing that I think Mr. Weisgerber is getting at is that maybe there's a more granular approach as we're talking about this, where we might be able to have tighter control over this, and if the objective is to ban it and not allow any more into the city than we currently have, I can go along with that. But I'd like to look into it a little bit more and find a way that we aren't necessarily, I don't know, biting off more than we can chew with this.
And again, what I was trying to get to, and Mr. Neal brought it up, is within several hundred yards of the elementary schools, a gas station sells a lot of smoke and vapor.
Wouldn't they be grandfathered in?
And that's fine. But as an example, right, if you said, where do I care? Do you get the intended outcome
From an outright ban.
from an out versus an outright ban?
Yeah, because the other issue is how do you audit the sale? I mean,
That would be my issue. Like
how do you prove that it's 51%? I mean, they could say, "Oh, that's not right." I mean,
you're going to say no, it's 49.
Well, if
Yeah.
marijuana became legal and the gas station decided they wanted to start selling marijuana, you would say they're grandfathered in, but they're not.
They would. I don't believe. And I have to.
They started selling vaping materials when vaping became popular. They didn't
Right.
sell it before that. They sold dip and cigarettes and beer and chips.
I think with marijuana, I think we're okay.
Okay.
But I think, with these, there are always going to be those that skirt that run
Yeah,
right
and I
up.
know. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying I don't know that it's fair to penalize a vape store or somebody that wants to come in and start a business in Loveland, especially in that shopping center that could use some businesses on Madeira, when right across the street there's Dunkin' Donuts attached to a store that's selling an entire counter and 3 glass cases of glass pipes.
It would be hard.
Not even vapes, glass pipes for marijuana.
An enforcement action there would be very protracted because you would have to go in and say that and then cite them to court. And then the only way you're going to get to what their actual sales volumes are probably are through discovery, is what I would guess. And
They're
they're gonna make
obviously they're selling more gas
right.
than they are
Yeah.
vapes or glass pipes. I get
I would hope so.
$3 and $4
Yeah.
bucks, $3 and $4 a gallon. Of course they are.
I get that, but they're also not paying $10 a square foot for rent,
Right.
which is what they'd be paying over there next to Ace Hardware, whatever.
Right.
Anyway,
I mean, at the end of the day,
I
it
think
sounds
we
like-
should have the public hearing and
For
see
sure.
what the has to say.
I'm going to come at this with a little different approach, probably a very unpopular point. If these things are legal and they're not statutorily not allowed to be sold or they're statutorily wrong, I can't help that they're unhealthy. And if you have to be 18 or older to buy them, why should we be in the business of regulating that on a business? If they're legal and if you have to be over 18 to buy them, the law is in place to prevent kids from getting enforce the law that's on the books. And I know this is going to be very unpopular because I'm the school board's appointee to this board. It's a very unpopular, but you can't regulate away somebody that's going to go get it from their parents. They're going to go get it from the store down the street, the store in Sims Township. And we're really saying that we're trying to regulate somebody's health, which we can't do. So I'm probably going to be on the side that's a very unpopular one on this because we ran into this when we tried to regulate indoor firing ranges. The whole topic came up back then as to how that was, and that's been 20 years ago now,
At least. Yeah.
So everybody kind of got it. We can't be going and telling everybody how to live their life. How many people in our community do have vapes and do those? And they're saying, now you're going to regulate them away from me where I can't go buy them at a store. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan from that standpoint from enforcing rules on people on something that is legal. And the CDC says they're bad. I can go on about that as well. And I understand that the school wants to have an easy way for somebody to say they can't get them. But if they're caught with them, they're disciplined. If they're bought in a store, we go back to the days when we were all under 19 or under 18. We knew where we could go purchase whatever beverage that we wanted. But we got caught. You knew that the liquor control was out there and they were going to catch you if you did it. But you didn't do it. So I think this is a real slippery slope if we start saying we're going to ban this. I have a little bit of instead of an outright ban, something similar to Rob said is hey, it can be in this specific area. We're going to regulate how you can visually see it. We want to regulate that you can't have the 50 LED lights on your front door. You can't have the big sign.
We actually do that.
Well, I know a lot of places are going to where they ban the signs that are on the inside of windows now.
Big X on top of your building.
This one really is more of a political call than anything.
I'm going to always come down on the side of we can't prevent somebody from, and if it's illegal for them to sell it, and we're in a community saying we're not going to let you sell that. I wouldn't want that. I mean, just because it's unhealthy, where does it stop? Where does it stop with obesity? Shut the ice cream shop down. We wouldn't want that.
No, I mean they tried to stop the Big Gulp in New York.
They did, and but people get around it. But there's probably a better way than an outright ban. Is my opinion.
So if I may just add, yeah, and I totally get where you're coming from, which is why I brought up the whole thing. How do we get granular about what is it we care about? But in the end, regulations are always late to the game, right? Laws always follow. They're never in front of things, right? So we're always having to get caught up. The question is, do we want to have a community standard versus legislating an outright ban to using, because we're not going to ban vaping, right?
Nope.
People are going to do it. They're allowed to do it. We're just not, from a community standard perspective, are we going to allow the sale in and around our schools, residences, etc.? This says we're not, and we're not anywhere, including our industrial park, right? So personally, I want to have a public hearing. I want to hear where we're going with this. If this is the first step to getting more granular, and this is why we have temporary, stoppages so that we don't get more till we get the legislation figured out. I think we got to move forward with the public hearing and come to grips with what is it the community wants to have, which is what the ask is here today.
Yeah.
Any more discussion, or do we want to have a motion?
I don't know how to make a motion
I
on
think
this
the
one.
motion is to
Well,
have a public hearing.
Motion
I
to-
want to find the dates. Is it our next?
Yeah, it's the first one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it'd be September 5th, and
Yeah, or about.
All right. Well, I'll move that we set a public hearing on September 5th at around 7 p.m. to consider the legislation around smoke shops.
do you want to? So I think it needs to be a two-part motion.
Okay.
So it needs to initiate as per 11:15. I mean, I guess you could have a public hearing and not initiate something, but I think to engage the wheels on the process, you would have a motion to initiate and set a public hearing.
Okay. So let me try that again. I move that we set a public hearing on September 5th at or around 7 p.m. To consider the initiation of zoning text amendment around smoke
Backwards.
shops. I did it backwards.
Backwards.
Oh my gosh.
Initiate and then set a
with the
public hearing.
Okay. All right. So
That's why I didn't want to do that.
yeah, thank you. I thought I set myself up. So to set the public hearing first, then initiate the zoning text amendment.
No, it's
I keep messing around.
backwards.
Okay.
You would if the commission were to take action tonight, and this was what. Yeah.
Then we set a public hearing after that.
Yes,
Okay.
so you would take action to initiate the public hearing, or to initiate. Got me confused. To initiate as per 11:15:03A, the text amendment process, and set a public hearing as per 11:15:05, I believe.
Jeez. So moved. Second.
It's under the recommendation. On the
Yes.
staff
Oh, thanks.
report.
I was getting lost in the legislation.
Motions suggestions are always under his report.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was looking for, but I thought I could find it in the title. Sorry, everybody. Well, I'm looking for the recommendation. What page?
Page 61.
61. Oh, thanks.
Number one.
The digital thing doesn't work for everybody. Okay, so I will move finally at long last that we initiate a zoning text amendment per section 115.03 and set a public hearing on September 5th at or around 7 p.m.
Second.
Mr. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Weisgerber,
Yes.
Parker,
No.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
4-0, motion carries.
4-1.
4-1.
4-1, motion carries.
All right.
All right, last item of business I have this evening, and we've really kind of gotten down into the meat of code text amendments. What I have before you this evening is the initiation of a zoning text amendment for the regulation of short-term rentals.
I'm going to make a suggestion
There's a lot of code here.
that we would have a work session. I know that's not one of the options, but I think we have a motion to go into a work session to review and discuss all the language in the text amendment. For
Yeah, I think there's 7 or 8 pages here. It's a lot to get through.
Yeah.
It's probably something that we saw. The work session was very productive with the food truck stuff. So
I would agree with you. I think the thing that I'm missing in here is the continuity with some of the longer rentals. You know, we do inspections where people flip homes and then rent them out. I'd like to see a consistent approach with what we're doing, and I think the work session allows us to have that conversation around what are we doing for short term, what are we doing for long term, where are they consistent, where should they be or where they should not be.
right.
And so I would absolutely suggest we take the time in a separate session to dive deep.
So do we need to make a motion to
Table.
You just said a motion instead of work session.
set a work session at sometime in the month of September at a date to be work with everybody's schedule, something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Somebody wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion for case number 202306 initiation of zoning text amendment to move to a work session sometime in the month of September.
Second.
Mr. Weisgerber,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Redmond,
Yes.
5-0, motion carries.
Any communications? We haven't got none. Okay. Any motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're adjourned.